Hey listeners, at the time of release of this episode, the Supreme Court has basically voted to overturn Roe versus Wade, which was the effectively one of the few statutes we had protecting reproductive rights in the United States. And the only real thing I can say is it's monstrous and regrettable that this has happened. And my my sincerest thoughts are with everyone who's going to be adversely affected by this. There will be links in the show notes for abortion funds and different support resources. Um, and I just implore everyone to try and stay vigilant and let's try and see what we can do to fight back against this kind of stuff. I only regret that there's not more I can do right now. So, without further ado, here's the episode.
After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
Hey folks, welcome back to the greenhouse. We're back again for another current events discussion with our DC correspondent Josh once again.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for having me back on the show.
Absolutely. It's been a while since we've done one of these, and to not to sound reductive, but quite a lot has happened.
Yeah, we finally have a verdict in Amber Depp and Johnny Depp's Amber Heard and Johnny Depp's trial. You know, it's big, earth-shattering events, right?
Dude, I thought there was never going to be an end to that thing, but
it's sort of amazing. Like, I mean, it's obviously it's completely unrelated to anything we really want to talk about today, but like, it's sort of weird how the entertainment sphere has sort of just been so loosely connected for like the past 10 years or so, but then like somehow everything coalesced around this singular divorce trial, or not divorce trial, but like this what is it, defamation?
yeah, and it's just I still can't imagine how or what compelled people to pick either side in that dispute. Couldn't have
Right,
been
yeah,
me.
that's
But it's like, again, it was like the one thing that everyone seemed to keep up with um in the wake of what I can only say confused messaging from those in power lately. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
Like, we're still kind of in this worsening inflation slash price gouging situation we're all in. We've observed like rights slide further and further back. And we're, increasingly watching this Democratic Party under Biden kind of just float there without much of a response. And that's kind of what was propelling me in this kind of quiet direction the show's been in lately, where I wanted to get, a discussion on something out. But one with like the Uvalde shooting, it felt kind of in poor taste for me to come and try to bumble and make sense of something that, has it's just the more we find out about it every day, the worse the picture looks, right? But also like there is this sense of there's no clear action item for people to do aside from begrudgingly or enthusiastically going to the polls, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of just been like what I've been ruminating on lately. And even in the context of like doing a politics, current affairs, society podcast, right? I try not to have a vision of what we do here that's, not in line with the scale of what we do. It's basically commentary we do here, right?
Right.
And I don't want to push people towards doom and gloom, but I also kind of want to have like some measured and like realistic approach to like what can someone do in the face of some of this aside from just consume it, participate in the spectacle, post ad nauseum, blah blah blah. And that's that's what triggered the start of this podcast, right? Was the January 6th um, insurrection, riot, uh,
Peaceful
open
protest.
peaceful protest. I was gonna say high school reunion field day. It had that vibe going on too. It just it's quite confusing to look at that event, and I'm kind of just using it as a reference point for everything since. What and especially like with these this new round of January 6th hearings
Well, it's the
that
first like public round of hearings, right?
mhm,
And obviously, there's in some cases certain things about it feel very much like we're just sort of for those who have not been following along, this is the whole story. But there's been new in some interesting details that have emerged from this. And I think like the one glowing concern is, and I was thinking about this when we were talking about, like as far as what's the prescriptive response to
mhm.
anything that's happening right now, and is it just voting? And unfortunately, I kind of feel like the Democratic prescriptive response to all this is just like vote. Like the vote harder ongoing joke seems to be the only thing they really have set in stone. We're not seeing, there seems to be a little bit of pushback on this, but initially they were like, oh well, we're not going to make any criminal referrals from this trial, which
Mhm.
yeah, or from the hearings, because to be fair, this investigative committee, because of the way it's done, doesn't have like a ton of like legal powers, but it can still make referrals to the Department of Justice, and I would think that they would be taken seriously.
Yeah, and I guess because of the issue of like, it's only referrals as a formal charges, right? It kind of prompts the
Yeah.
question of why now? And there's been this, existing view that January 6th and repeatedly revisiting January 6th is one of the few existing avenues the party has left at this point to keep its base
Mhm.
engaged because it views it will view that event as a shock to the system, right?
Yeah.
So continuously bringing it back up, especially with the inadequate results from every time they've tried to bring it up, you know what I mean? It gets certain people fired up, but then what do you make of this idea that like it just makes them look really preoccupied with something that only affected only them while there is a looming economic issue?
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny that like, the kind of controlling arm of the party and whatnot is very much, not just in this event, but like is always conservative messaging, right? That is kind
Mhm.
of the key to success is messaging. How do we message our way to electoral success, to policy success, et cetera, et cetera?
Mhm.
Yet we're, it's they're really bad at it. And I think, to be fair, this is something that I haven't really seen so much from the party elites, but from more so like the laymen. And I mean, to the point, and like the common ness that I've seen this like on Twitter, what I almost made me think that it has to be like bots on some level, and maybe it is, maybe
Now
it's
who's
not.
using bots?
Yeah. But like I keep seeing them say like, oh, like, inflation, and gas prices mean nothing if we don't have our democracy. And it's a sentiment I understand,
Mhm.
and I don't wholly disagree with it, but it's very much like forget about your material interests, and not like in a way that like, like, hey, like, rich people, like, like give a little to society. This is like, yeah, like you're struggling to, make ends meet, but forget about that for a minute. This is what's really important. And like it's like a fundamental misunderstanding of how like this is how like demagogues rise to power. This is how democracy dies, is that like the system is failing to fundamentally provide for basic and not basic things. And that's kind of been the issue that we've seen for years. I mean, the pandemic highlighted a lot of our deficiencies.
Mhm.
Um, the situation now highlights further deficiencies, and it still makes sense, like this electoral incentive too. Like I guarantee, we've had, you know, bills that were proposed to sort of curb gas prices and things like that, and Republicans voted them down. I guarantee, January 6th, that's to, throw out an arbitrary date, 2023, when they presumably have the majority, they might pass something, right? To show that like, oh, like, well, like, we did this. Certainly killing it fits with their, bullshit free market principles, but it's more so just like we have this like, people are aware of how like the political game is played and how it can be played and what, strategies are optional. And unfortunately, we've made really important policies, sort of embedded into that game.
And it's like exacerbated by this. And I always wonder, like, to what degree is it like genuinely felt and what degree is it cynically applied?
Hmm.
But the reverence for these institutions that exist, for like these kind of vague, like really like feel this in like a way that only a ideologically committed Democrat does. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Of democracy, freedom, the whole apple pie with the eagle flying over it type shit, right? It's it's fully abstracted now, and I think it's kind of relegated to people who see that as respectable, or people who see that as their oh my god, as what they value. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But people also count on the system to deliver on them practically, right? Deliver
Yeah.
for them practically. And one of those things, right, is that car dependency is a guarantee, basically. Like
Hmm.
you're not getting around on foot anymore. But then to have gas prices go up at a time when workplaces are telling people to get back to work, for example, right? Or driving up the prices for even common goods at a time when housing is becoming scarcer,
Hmm.
at a time when evictions are more commonplace. A lot of the um, threadbare protections people had over the pandemic have been like formally wiped out at this point, right?
Right. Yeah.
How do you get people to value those abstract things in a statesman style context when you have to physically make ends meet? And I think that's the kind of thing that's turned people off from engaging with the system as is to begin with, right? Especially if you've been neglected for like the past 30 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, I definitely agree with all of that, and it's something that they're failing to grasp on this standpoint. I know there was this one report. I mean, this is a few weeks ago, maybe even a month or two, where you had this report that like I think Katie Porter, Representative Katie Porter from California, like had this like
Mhm.
meeting with like other Democrats where she was like talking about the inflation thing with mainly in regards to grocery prices, and like wow, like that's not like coming up in like the polls and whatnot, which like strikes me as shocking. Like there's no way they're not polling that. Like every poll shows that that's been an issue for a long time now. There's no way
Mhm.
that like I mean I don't know. I've been around enough like campaign people to know that their polls aren't always reliable, but I mean that's not like who do you want to win the election? That's like are you upset with, this? And like and some like I've seen like certain news stations um cover this too, and I think it's like kind of in a disingenuous way, like with like Joe Biden's approval on handling inflation. It's like, does that really mean anything? Like if the fact that he has like, you know, 20% approve or whatever, it's like, does that mean 20% approve of inflation? Like, it's just such a bizarre uh
Right.
like a thing to get at. And it's like, yeah, like no one, like even his like firmest supporters aren't going to be happy about the current situation. His handling of it, it's what is the handling of this? I don't
Right.
know. I think that they're kind of taking, various, stabs in the dark because, you know, we as a society, frankly, lack a political imagination for anything other than the neoliberalism of the past, you know, 50, 60 years.
I was gonna butt in with a point of, I mean, he can't even handle a bike, but I think like again, like I had to.
What a wild moment. Like just this, he falls over. You can, like, I mean, there's like a little breakdown video showing how he does it. I mean, if you look close enough, yeah, you can see how it happens. But it's just sort of like, it happens. You get this, picture of him like, looking like a turtle on his back. Like, it's a funny moment. But of course it has to be like so polarized, like it's the ultimate sign of his mental deficiency, or it is a unique moment of heroism that he got back up off the ground. Like, what was he gonna do?
And that
Just
keeps happening for every little snafu now. Like
and
there is a clockwork. These right wing guys were like, there we go, it's Brandon at work, and then you have the other side of just like Biden is brave for shitting himself at the Rose Garden, and we will not tolerate this slant. Like that kind of shit.
like
Like
it's here, like
clockwork.
yeah, like what was he gonna do? Like just lay there, just like I'm just waiting for the Lord to take me now. Like what's like what's the heroism? And like and it's kind of wind that back to like the January 6th thing too. Like I think um I haven't seen as much with the communities thing, but like part of the narrative around this all the time has always been like, oh, Mike Pence was heroic for not breaking the law and doing something that he didn't have the
Or
power to
even
do.
with
It's like,
Liz Cheney for agreeing to have the hearing in
right.
the first place. Like
I mean, at
this
least that I'll give a little bit more credit to because, like, yeah, it did cost her politically. Like, Pence is trying to still ride this like weird fine line of like, well, I can't, like the base wants to hang me, but how do I get their vote? Like,
it's funny with Pence too. He's like the last guy who will still say, "Yeah, I'm in the Tea Party." All those people
oh
became
yeah.
Trump's base at this point. He's the only one who's like, "Oh, we're still in this thing, right? We're not. Oh shit."
Well, and he's like, well, of course I'm still loyal to the president and whatnot. Like, and it's like insane. Like, I mean, and there's been more interesting details that have emerged from this that, like, just how early Trump was like, yeah, like he deserves to be hung by my base.
Dude, that
For,
was that was so funny. Oh god.
did you all see the bit apparently from like their last phone conversation?
Yeah, it
So
was
like,
like very bitchy, right? That
yeah,
like
he was like, if you don't do this, I don't want to be your friend anymore.
classic
Like
Trump.
just
Classic.
like just grade school level banter. And then apparently, like according to like one of the Ivanka things, he had like once he was off the phone called him a pussy, like
Oh
which
god.
and I've said this before, and I'm joking in case the FBI hears this, but I did feel like our one bipartisan path forward from this was hanging Mike Pence, but the moment's passed.
And it would be like considering like I know that January 6th was a scary event as observed by some people. I'm not going to deny that. It was also low key funny in very dark ways. Like the
Oh yeah.
guys who were having heart attacks while trying to scale the wall, that shit was funny to me.
Yeah, like when you
Uh,
seen like was it I can't remember, but the person like just falling off the
right.
wall into the fence. I mean, the whole QAnon shaman character, like just
It's
everything about it is like wild. Like you couldn't make it up.
you could exactly, and like I'm just imagining this jackass scene style setup of the hanging of Pence. And it would I don't know how you would proceed from that point. The past, couple years since January 6th have already been weird. I mean, it's only been 1 year at this point, right? 1 year and change.
No, it's been two.
It's been
Or
fuck
it
me.
is 1 year. Oh, well, it is 1 year and change.
Okay,
It's
okay,
one
okay,
and a
1 year
half
and change.
years. Yeah,
I
it's
was
like,
I was
oh yeah,
about to
yeah.
lose my mind.
2020 is when the election happens. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's been a wild couple of months since then, but imagine it took that route. I think we would be at fall of the empire at that point.
Yeah, I mean, and like it's like, and it's interesting too because like we've talked about like there's sort of like this lack of capacity to sort of address these structural issues with election things. Like, yet I don't really hear people talk about like just how bullshit our system is. That like I've seen people talk about like how heroic like it was for like the Secret Service guy or like Congress Chamberlain, whatever person it was,
Right.
to like grab the wooden box with the the certified ballots or whatever. And they're like, well, he didn't do that. There could have been a constitutional crisis. And it's like, what? Like how, like, that's such a stupid fragility of the system that, like, oh, well, if these like handwritten ballots, even though like we know months in advance at this point, like that this person's the president, like it's insane to me that like just a little thing like that is like a constitutional crisis. Like maybe we should rewrite the laws that like that, because that's pretty fucking stupid, frankly.
Right.
Or even other things where it's like, oh, well, like these, brave, Republicans who, told Trump like what he wanted was illegal. Which again, it's like, I guess next time you pump down a few loggers and decide not to get behind the wheel, I guess that makes you a hero, for, not drunk driving. But, that's another conversation. But like, these heroes, quote unquote heroes for like, telling him that it was illegal.
And also, like, just to interject with like the Liz Cheney thing, and even the other Republican who voted committee, they are the
Yeah.
usual suspects, because like Liz Cheney has always been a "how dare you, sir" kind of Republican.
Yeah.
She's there to represent the neocon brand. The other
And threw
guy,
her lesbian sister under the bus to get elected in the first place.
exactly. Like again, I think she's spiteful for that, but I mean, she's a hero now, same way as George Bush. But the other guy in the mix, I forgot what his name is, but he is an Illinois, something like that. He's an Illinois representative, and he represents like the wealthy suburbs around Chicago.
Yeah.
So he's still a usual suspect.
Mm-hmm.
For like, well, the suburbanites are the kind of people who, even if they don't like liberals, were the kind of people who thought January 6th was aesthetically upsetting to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense that they fit the bill. And every time there's a Republican hero, dear listener, just read between the lines a little bit on who's saying it and why.
Right. Yeah. And I think, it's, as I said, like these heroes where it's like, they're like, oh, well, it'd be illegal to redo the votes. But now they're like, well, if we could rewrite the laws ahead of time. And it's just like, it's just so ridiculous that it's like, okay, like these seem problematic. Like, yes, voter suppression and all this stuff is problematic too, and also needs to be addressed. But like the fact that, this electoral college system that we, are blessed with by, the graces of, the founders who, again, it wasn't, and in general, when we talk about like the founders' wisdom and whatnot, it's always like
it's civic religion at its finest. Like, it's, you believe they did it because they knew better, and not
exactly. I mean, it's like they're not a monolith. Like they were probably, maybe I don't want to say they were necessarily as, but they might have been as divided as we are today, frankly, on a number of things. They were just kind of settled for, this is the most compromised position we can make on this Constitution.
And it's also like, is it a compromise because they were geniuses and they thought this was the best, or is it just because it was a hot afternoon in Virginia where they were writing the paper?
Exactly, yeah. Or just like, this is, we'll punt down like, the slavery issue and some other issues down the road, like,
which they admitted to in like supplemental documents like the Federalist Papers and whatnot. There's all these personal writings to attest that this is an incomplete system, and chances are it's going to need to be amended down the line. But we've thoroughly processed this through civic religion at this point.
Yeah, and it just strikes me as astonishing that, like, from the electoral perspective, which isn't really part of our civic religion, like the electoral college is usually like this thing that you learn about, maybe in high school, and it's kind of like do you think you vote for president? Well, actually, you vote for the electors for the president, and like it's just this kind of like weird, like nebulous thing. But like no one loves the system unless they deliberately benefit from it, or they're a stooge for a party that deliberately benefits from it. But like, and I think that it's like, at least on the Democratic side, I think they just are fundamentally like, there's no pushback on it. And like I get that, like, maybe it's difficult to like completely abolish the system, but the fact that again, like it's a constitutional crisis if like the QAnon shaman like burns the ballot box, like what?
It's silly shit. It's such weird shit. And with this recent round of January 6th hearings, right? Like, I can't really I'll admit I've done very little reading, but I have seen, I'm not sure what they found out that's new this time. And this another chance to maybe make a swipe at whatever they were trying to do during the Trump impeachment, during the other sealed hearings they've had on this, and any other effort they've made to try to like make this legislative priority.
Well, I think the big thing that they've been pushing, I think so the overarching theme is that like this was premeditated. It wasn't just sort of Trump benefiting from a rowdy crowd or whatever. That this was like deliberately orchestrated. And to a lesser extent, there's this point that he actually knew that he lost, which again, I think that a lot of people are too dismissive of Trump as an idiot, like including in the Republican Party, right? I mean, like Lindsey Graham goes from 1 minute, condemning him to the next, down on his knees. You can finish the picture yourself.
Happy Pride Month.
Yeah. Happy Pride Month, Lindsay. May you, or Lady G, whatever you want to call yourself these days. But yeah, so anyway, so like, then he goes to that, and it's like, there's sort of like this idea that like him and these other Republicans have that like, oh, as long as I placate him, he doesn't know. But like, I've seen like these like interviews that are like, like sort of, they're not off the record, but like the ones that like kind of go in the books between Trump and different reporters. And then, like he'll talk about it. He's like, oh yeah, that's Lindsay for you. Like, just whatever direction the wind's blowing. And like, he knows, and he loves that they have to like bend over backwards to cater to him, especially after they did things like I think he's openly called like Haley Stevens like a kiss ass, like just like that, like she'll just do anything to like get in his good graces, and like she's not alone.
Overall, what can we come to expect from this hearing? Any crazy predictions? Or
I don't know. I mean, like I'm just like waiting for something. Like I don't know. It's like I don't know what would be the, and it's kind of weird. I think that to some extent we kind of romanticize the idea of like a smoking gun when it comes to these things. Cause like, even when you hear about like, like when you go look at like the Nixon smoking gun for Watergate, it's like something that I feel like the average political citizen or like, moderately engaged, politically citizen would not really see as like a huge thing. It's like, you have to explain like, oh, well, because like the Nixon smoking gun, for those who aren't familiar, is just that there's a recording because he recorded everything, which was his downfall, that he basically directed the FBI to stop the investigation of Watergate, which had they probably just done it, like he would have gotten a slap on the wrist at best, probably, or at worst in his case. But, so it's like, oh, it's the direction of like the FBI to, cover his tracks basically. But it's just like this really weird, like nebulous legal thing that most people wouldn't necessarily get and whereas like the Trump administration, I mean, like the whole place is like a smokehouse. Like it doesn't,
it's also funny, right? Because the Nixon thing, there's this alleged theory there too, if you want to entertain this, that like there's different competing camps in the federal government that had an incentive to make Watergate bigger than it was. Some would say like, oh, it was a beef between the CIA and the FBI, for example. But with, the Trump administration, you don't really see a lot of like, aside from like the occasional like, DOD goons say like, well, we can't do that. Pretty much the State Department, FBI, CIA was pretty quiet, to be honest, but like, State Department, FBI, for example, we're pretty much like, hey, we'll do whatever you tell us, or options. You don't see that level of scandal in this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and this is like stuff that like happened earlier in the administration, but there were some military directives that like, there were kind of competing people in his cabinet that were like you can't just like follow through on that. Like he's gonna forget about it in the morning anyways. Like let's just let's not nuke Iran or whatever. Like
let's not nuke them, but let's definitely like top general. That's
right. Yeah, like there's things like that happen, but like there was from what I understand, a number of things that could have happened that didn't, including after he had already lost the election, which kind of highlights, beyond just the nature of January 6th, but I mean, I think it really emphasizes it, is that we have a probably overly long lame duck period.
Mm-hmm. This committee does make any findings. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think there. Hold on. People trying to spam call me in the middle of my podcast. What is this? What is this? Oh my gosh. So there's been plenty of stuff that they could have got Trump on if they were a little bit more serious. There's also just the reality of like kind of bend the rules a bit if you're serious about using power that we know Democrats are allergic to. But I'm also curious to the extent that they're counting on some big committee thing to give them some electoral juice.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm trying to like put a bow on this a little bit, right? Is like they need a W that gives the public an incentive to vote for them.
Mm-hmm.
And as of late, it be how do we get that X factor to get people to vote for us without delivering on anything solid, which would and the thing about the solid deliveries for things like economic aid, some measure of like climate mitigation or any like big project where they to lose political capital, right? They're scared of spending that capital basically. And I think that, a win in this committee fight is probably going to be what they're like, if they ever find it, will be like, see, we found it. You got to vote for us now.
Well, I think the bigger win, and like, they kind of have a little bit with like, sort of like exposing the role of like Ron Johnson is like trying to, introduce those alternate slate of electors that they were looking to do to like, sort of flip certain state results to Mike Pence. I think their wins, the extent to which that they'll actually be like real wins, not just like, yeah, like, we've exposed that Trump's a piece of shit, for the millionth time. Most of which was self-inflicted. I think that the wins are like if you can point to other people in the apparatus, particularly those in Congress. Maybe you can't necessarily threaten their specific electoral prospects, but you can paint the party in a broader brush, which they are reluctant to do. But maybe, I mean, I really hope that this is, a wake-up call to some extent that like you need to do something, because you can't have this rhetoric that democracy itself is on the line in this next election, yet we also need a strong Republican Party who seeks to strip away your electoral rights, your bodily autonomy, everything you can think of, pretty much, like outside of like your rights to be an unpersecuted, unchallenged Christian and carry a gun. Anything that's that is on the table for removal in their books. So like that's like the thing that like it's like the rhetoric is not matching what is being even attempted to be delivered on by the party right now. Should we talk about some of the party's proposed electoral solutions for this upcoming cycle?
That's what I was trying to figure out how to segue, right? Because it's like the answer is, well, you need to win an election somehow.
Yes.
And some proven winners, I say with extreme sarcasm, are back again to remind us what they think is how to win. So reading again in Clinton's comments in the Financial Times earlier, I don't even know if I want to quote her on this, but like I don't have the full quote available because everything's paywalled. Fuck. Okay, that makes it easier for me. That makes it easier for me. Basically, Hillary Clinton came back once again with an old talking horse of hers, which is this idea that fixating on trans issues is what causes Democrats to lose. Now, I just want to stress that this is not the first time she's really said this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, this is something I've spoken on a bit, right? It's that, Hillary Clinton at least had a lot of astroturfed LGBT support in 2016, but her actual record on LGBT issues has always been dubious to me. Whether it's,
Yeah, she did a few things in the lead up just to kind of give, like, put some lines on the CV or resume, if you will. But yeah, it's not exactly a strong, committed record.
yeah, and her initial round of comments that I'm referencing here is when there was the transgender bathroom issue in Virginia, if anyone
Mm.
remembers that. And I thought that when it wasn't being talked about as of at least a couple years ago, that we'd made some progress from then. But I guess we're sliding back, and we've actually just gotten into it far worse. But a lot of what you're hearing today in this stupid ass trans discourse that people are re-engaging in again, right, is this idea of like trans, and now more specifically all queer people, as predators in the open, basically, right? The idea of groomers, and that's kind of where that initial round of
Well,
rhetoric came from.
and I mean, this maybe sounds dismissive of this, but I always feel like this trans thing is pure projection, and like
Uh-huh.
it's all perception. That, like, I don't feel like the Democratic Party is particularly, like, I don't even think it's the strongest ally for the community either. I
Hmm.
mean, no political party is, at least none of the major ones, but like they're you know they're there's sort of this recognition of, like, basic humanity of trans peoples and whatnot, but that's about it. Like, I don't feel like they're not pushing for, like, the bathroom debate, using that as like an example because it's probably like
Hmm.
the easiest.
And that was like
They
2016 or so, right?
Yeah, it was might have been, yeah, 2016, 2015.
Yeah.
Um like, that issue was fundamental. Like, it wasn't like Democrats put up a bill in a state to be like, oh yes, like, if you think, if you're a trans woman, you can use the woman's bathroom, trans man bathroom, or if you're transitioning, so forth.
Hmm.
That's not how that went down. It was Republicans. I can't remember which state it was in. At like was the first one, but that was the one where they made the push to, like, ban trans people from using other bathrooms, and that's always been how this trans issue has done. It's always been, conservative, like, aggression against that community, and, like, to the point where, and it's kind of getting, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's getting to the point of, kind of genocidal talks of, like, we
Hmm.
should ban hormone therapies and, like, all this stuff, which is absolutely, detestable and insane that, it's getting to this level. But, it's again, it's like, it's not like you're getting, like, I don't feel like Democrats are focusing on these issues. They're playing a little bit of defensive,
Hmm.
but it's just like there's this perception, and like it exists in, like, that Republican base. Like, I know I have this conversation with, you know crazy cousins and whatnot of, like, like, oh, well, Democrats want to reassign all our genders, and, like, whatever, bullshit you can come up with, because,
Right.
like, this is just how it works for that base. This is the rhetoric that they've been catering to, and again, like, I think, the Liz Cheneys of the world, the Adam Kissingers, and, like, the other Republicans who, maybe don't have as much, let's say they're a little less socially conservative in their personal lives, right? But they just do it to cater to their base. Like, they've realized that they've completely lost control of it.
Hmm.
And that's what's happening when they keep catering, saying the stuff like, trans people are horrible, they're monsters that are grooming children. Um, Even though Republicans are the ones, forcing rape victims to pay child support to
Hmm.
their rapists, and legalizing child marriage, basically, um, in various places. But and like Hillary Clinton's statement, it just kind of it gives legitimacy to that point of view on the left, and you have these people who, you have the liberals in the Democratic Party who are, it's the whole statement that the infamous quote from Martin Luther King about white moderates, not the firmest of allies, and I think that's like the harm in stuff that like Clinton has to say about this subject is um it has an audience still, regardless of however you may feel that her name has been disparaged and disgraced in the political world.
And that's like it's hurt the same way both times, in my opinion, because in the first time she said it in 2016, it was basically her framing it as, this is a boutique issue, don't talk about it, forget the impact this is going to have, even if that's not what she said directly. It was a legitimate point to then bring up and be like, well, we need to have a serious reckoning with either LGBT issues more broadly in the Democratic Party, or, and at least in this case, whether or not Hillary Clinton's record on this is as reliable as people claim it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, just simply put, the Democratic Party could have just come out and said, we're just upping the number of unisex bathrooms, period, and like kind of artfully dodged their way around it, but at least addressed it in that way. That's one way they could have done it. Another way could have been like just denouncing this as transphobia. That would have been more useful, even if it's not much. But for Clinton to come in and say, especially when she led that kind of push of, you guys are too radical, the alleged majority of the population does not care about this or will not be impacted by this, blah blah blah. You're like basically she's coming in and saying, you guys are scaring the hose, and it's like, I don't think so necessarily. And I think when you have the Democrats say things like, doesn't democracy matter, I mean, you can put the question right back, don't human rights matter?
Yeah, and I mean, and I think, and like this gets to a broader discussion, right? I mean, like, there's sort of a chicken and egg thing with, like, I would say with democracy and human rights, like that's human democracy is sort of this, in theory, this protection of human rights. It's not perfect in a number of ways. I mean, what we have, and I mean, not to get all like, well, we have a republic, but like there's a lot of ways that our society just fails to live up to democratic principles, the way our elections are run, the way.
But that is the liberal conception of it,
Yes.
though, right? That if you have a society that values freedom and rights, blah blah blah, it should be run democratically. That's not
Exactly, yeah. And it's there's sort of that, but like again, it's like these things they shouldn't be. They should be part and parcel and the same. But there's this sort of like not just Clinton. There's been a lot of people saying this in the past, but she gives more credibility to it. That like you don't like if what point does our democracy serve if we're like well, the fascists want all this, so we'll just give it to them in exchange for like the continuance of our democracy. Well, like, what point does the democracy serve if they have everything they want and we have good feelings about being able to vote and maybe have an outcome that like 1 in 100 will change something? Because that's the problem right now is the right now I think the charitable take is like it's like your choice is between radical lunatics or a bunch of eunuchs who are unwilling to stand up against them.
It is frustrating, and I think both times now we've seen people come out in defense of that kind of rhetoric. I remember the first time like I brought that up, I had got into an online altercation with someone on that, and the kind of stock response they had is like, well, what have you done to address transphobia in your circle? You know what I mean?
Well, and
like
I mean,
that's it. Or like even
yeah.
worse, like people just double down on it and be like, well, sucks to suck, but like we have to play realistic. That keeps being brought up. We have to play realistic.
And it's weird too because like there's this emphasis that like, well, they're like it's such a minority group, And like, yeah, that's largely true, but like, just because they're a minority doesn't mean that like they should be treated like shit. Like, yeah, it's such a minority that like, you know what, your transphobia, like you're so unlikely to actually run into this. Why should you care? Why does it matter to you that like, I mean, I've had, you know, women in the men's bathroom before who were not transitioning. It's whatever.
You
Like,
go to a bar on a Friday night, you'll see women run into a men's restroom, depending on
and
where
vice
you're at.
versa.
Exactly.
Though sometimes, you know, sometimes that is for, you know, other reasons. But you know,
we digress.
that's a digression. But and yeah, and like, and you know, of course, like, and we have to like, you know, they reduce everyone to like a groomer that's not, you know, a white Christian male. You know, ignore histories of, you know, sexual abuses in the Catholic Church, ignore history of, you know, every other wild thing that happens, you know, in this country from, you know, cis straight people. You know, it's like, let's not pretend that like one group is, you know, more uniquely capable of grooming than the other. If we should, I mean, like, I mean, not saying that that's like not a problem at all, right? I mean, anything that, you know, you know, doing anything improper to children is obviously horrible,
but also like, isn't it weird that like every time they say some shit like you guys are groomers, now we're stuck on the back pedal trying to address some shit. We can't even like kick back with like, what are you talking about? Look at Dennis Hastert. Like that should be the automatic reply, but we're always on the back pedal.
Yeah, the automatic reply should be, you know, Dennis Hasser. It should be, you know, Jim Jordan, who's still there.
Right.
I mean, I know like he hasn't done anything personally, or at least that's not any of the allegations. But like, you know, it's someone who has enabled that awful culture. That, or you know, even you know, just like the, like, was it Tennessee where they passed like the child marriage bill basically,
Right.
and like that stuff where it's like, this is stuff that like kind of flies in the face of that. But like, and it's just, I mean, there's, you know, to some extent, like, you know, you can't necessarily reason with people. Not all of them, but like, I mean, the ones you can reason, and that's like the whole point. That's like how our elections are, right? Is you're trying to get that, you know, whatever group of persuadable people there are, you need to like do this. And like, you know, like the way that they feel that we have to engage the right on its own terms, especially like, you know, trans issues are probably some of the most pronounced ones, right? Of just like, well, you know, we have to go through like, well, you know, like, I know some trans people, they're not groomers. Like, we have to like entertain that is like on some level worthy of discussion.
And then to top it off too, like when proven losers like Clinton, I'm sorry, pop in with like, well, this is boutique and you shouldn't talk about it. It once again betrays that realization that like, oh, so this is something you guys don't see worthy of spending political capital on. You see none of this as being worthy of spending political capital on, other than January 6th. And don't get me wrong, if they did it in conjunction with a whole package of things, maybe they had a case for it. But it just looks like,
well, and usually it's like this is the kind of stuff that gets like carved out of different spending bills, right? Like, you know, if you have like some type of healthcare thing, like the only way you're able to get, you know, whatever votes you need passed is you got to like carve out the section about like, you know, providing for hormone therapy or whatever, you know, and something like of that nature. Like, this is the stuff that always gets carved out. But the problem is like that stuff is never put in or voted on in its own merits. And, you know, to some extent, I mean, I think like all of this, you know, January 6th, transphobia, every issue with the party, I mean, a lot of it is boiling down to like this sort of generational battle that is, you know, you know, I think initially when we actually talked about this, you know, doing another episode, it was in response to like a Dianne Feinstein story about how, you know, she's still alive and kicking and, you know, contributing, you know, doing God's work at the ripe old age of I can't remember. Is she she's not in her 90s yet, but she's
let me pull
allegedly completely out of her mind and senile at this point. But you know, you know, it's like, I think that this generational gap is really becoming a pronounced problem where, like, you know, trans issues weren't really like even seen as valid, I would say, until like the past 5 years.
That's yeah.
Maybe 7 if we go back to or 6 if we go back to like the bathroom stuff. Because before that it was, kind of like, the jokes that comedians are getting in trouble with now, like that was kind of just that was
That
seen as
was
like
the norm back in the
that
day.
was the
Yeah.
inoffensive, like the whole joke, fun for the whole family type joke, like, not the,
Right.
one roasting it, like, and that was, and to some extent, like, I'm not, defending transphobes or anything, but I mean, there's on some level, I think that maybe there needs to be better, education from like allies to people who are not allies, trying to like bring them to your position, like some of the stuff that, and now granted, I think that like, J.K. Rowling is completely, out of her mind. But, like early on, I was like, okay, like, yeah, like I don't agree with any of this, but like, this doesn't seem too far out of the mainstream. And it's like, I feel like we need to sort of use those as teachable moments, as much as we can. I mean, obviously some people, it's not going to happen, but I think that there does need to be, stronger commitment from that, and that's something that I think can be done non-electorally, because I think, really the only way that you're going to be able to achieve those electoral outcomes are convincing people that this is a group, worthy of your respect and, compassion, at least on just like a basic human level.
Hmm. I agree with that 100%. Like all of this is kind of going to show, like, one, we have not really fully processed how fast culture has moved in the past 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, culture passing you by doesn't give anyone an excuse to, be bigoted. But, it's, I think it just, we live these bizarre lives now. And I think that how fully abstracted and online we are has an effect on why people are unable to process some of this shit to some degree. And also, like, the Feinstein story, we never got around to it, but that, in addition to like Hillary Clinton's comments, and even just like we were talking about earlier with shit like polling and how, like, it seems to belie now that whatever organizations and class or whatever that runs this shit now is fully out of touch.
Yeah.
I think they are fully out of touch at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that like it's, and even, I mean, I thought this was kind of weird because I was, I think it was actually Debbie Stabenow who said it was also, no spring chicken herself, but like they were talking about the gas prices, and she's like, "Well, I'm driving around my like electric car," like, and it was just kind of like wild. Like, I mean, also, I mean, I guess like, on a slightly brighter note, it was kind of, because she was talking about it, it was Michigan made, and I don't know if it was GM or whoever, but like, it's like, oh, I guess like, that market is sort of, you kind of, blink and you miss how much that's developed. But at the same time, also still not the most accessible vehicle
it's not really accessible. And like, it's
as much as cars have been accessible for the past,
it's so
year
stupid because,
anyways.
like, I should admit that, like, I am a car guy, but like I'm ultimately like pro transit. I prefer mass transit over everything else.
Sure.
But I was always intrigued by the idea of electric cars when I was younger and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And just compared to where we are now, compared to like where it was when I was like learning about this as a kid, it has
Yeah.
developed a lot. But I would just warn people, like, this exists to protect the auto industry. It does not exist to end fossil fuels. That's the first thing everyone's got to remember. And just, it doesn't change the relationship we have of extraction and environmental degradation. I'd argue it has a similar impact to fossil fuels in that sense. But the big thing about Stabenow saying that had me on, it had me just like incensed, was you can't really charge an electric car for free. That's the myth that, like, we have around them. But it's like, you got to get the outlet installed in your home. That's an installation fee.
Well, and I mean, just the electric power too. I mean, like there is an environmental.
Yeah, you're paying the
impact to that,
electricity
too.
for it to charge your shit, right? And it's like, to top it off, you need to get the outlet built. So if you rent your SOL, if you use public charging, it might be too far and few between depending on where you live. And guess what? Not all meters are free, so you might have to pay.
Mhm.
Now, if of course it's probably cheaper than gas, given what we're looking
Especially
at
now.
lately. But it's like it is this kind of thing where it's like the technology exists through subsidization, and people pushing for it are pushing
And
for
it's
the
not properly subsidized for
not at
consumers
all,
either.
not at all,
It's
right?
subsidized entirely for the companies making them, because like you don't have charging stations as part of like infrastructure things and stuff like that, and they absolutely should be a part of that. It's still a slow transition to get those accessible, and I mean, and clearly, I mean, I think you look at like what's happened in Texas over the past couple of years of its power grid, like I mean,
Right.
and I doubt it's like it would be an outlier in that, but like
Well, Texas is not the only outlier. I know we're taking a detour on infrastructure,
yeah.
but like finally I know something I'm talking about for once. Um, it's our energy infrastructure is severely out of date. Like
Yeah.
your power lines are already bound to be overloaded. The grid as it exists is overloaded, and even if you transition every car driver to electric, right?
The whole
I,
grid needs to be revitalized.
the whole grid needs to be revitalized, and guess what? That grid isn't necessarily powered by sustainable fuel sources yet.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Let's
that's the other thing too. It's
Yeah,
not we're not
you're still
necessarily
using fossil fuels to like power that. Maybe you meet energy demand by going nuclear. I'm like I jump the fence on nuclear every now and then, but like that's a consideration you need to take if you're gonna go that route. And I don't think people think that far ahead with some of this shit.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, like, and this is a complete detour at this point, but like environmentalism has always kind of it's always been a difficult ambition, just as far as like reality versus aspirations and things like that. And we haven't necessarily uh, you know come to terms with the plan to get off fossil fuels beyond just sending a 14-year-old girl out to yell at world leaders that they need to do it. There's not necessarily, and I'm not throwing shade at Greta, but like maybe throwing shade more so at the movement that is not necessarily producing like a clear path forward. And there's
Well,
is
and
nuclear good, is it bad? Like there's all kinds of just a mess,
there's so many internal debates in it, and even then, like you're asking very tough questions of people.
Yeah.
Like, one of my pet ideas that would get me shot if I said it was, oh, now I'm gonna say it. Is
What's
what
that red
if?
light?
Oh shit! Oh fuck! Oh shit! Well, so it's like you would have to drop the American standard of living if you
Yeah.
don't want to develop the infrastructure. Blah blah blah. Now, how do you ask people to do that, especially after what I can assume is only like 60 to 80 years of the highest standard of living in the world or something? For like
Yeah,
our
something.
very for our very richest especially.
Yeah.
So again, it's like that's the kind of stuff that is going over everyone's heads, but especially over the heads of, those in power. It must be nice to take an electric all the way to DC, but that is still not uh, a feasible or even available solution for everyone right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, like this show being disorganized, some things also never change. I was just looking at the outline. Have you were the one who sent me the stuff about the Florida Republicans making a hissy fit
Oh my
about what
God.
happened in Colombia?
Yeah, so like in Colombia there was I don't know a whole lot about the election, but I know that a leftist won.
Mhm.
And of course the Florida Republicans naturally questioned the results and legitimacy of that election. And basically kind of like made this big point about they'll accept, like anyway, it's like it's an election. Like it wasn't even like a revolution, but we'll accept economic refugees from.
It was like again, like it's very weird to like try to
This
look at
Cuba
Latin
thing
America.
is sort of like lost its generational appeal. We
It
need to find
has.
a new target, so Colombia.
And that's the thing. Like I also haven't been able to keep up with like what was going on with the Colombian election. I hear that they are ostensibly leftist candidates. Now, would it be enough to trigger this level of response? I never thought it would be justifiable, right? But like you said, it's like, the Miami Cuban industrial complex is back at it with a we're just trying to relitigate like, the uh escape from communism, victims of communism strategy. And I don't know, I once again don't know who it's for.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I guess this is just, I mean, it's like this weird thing where, like, I mean, I've got a point here, but like, I've always kind of thought like life would be easier to go through, like as a conservative and whatnot. But every win they get, they somehow make themselves the victim in all of it.
And then they project it. It's like liberals
Yes.
are the ones
I
who
mean,
have victim complexes and shit.
right? And like, I mean, you obviously have it with like the impending Roe v. Wade overturnment. Like that, like, oh, we were like the sanctity of the court was violated by this leak that was we all shut up about because we realized it was probably one of our own that leaked it. But like everything is spun to be a victim, and like there's sort of this idea that like, well, we still like do good things, right? So like we'll help the people, like it feels good when it's like, well, we're saving people from awful leftist regimes, right? And you kind of you have it with obviously this international thing with Cuba or Colombia, but you also even have it with like the red flight from different states, right? You can see them all excited about like, well, there's all these people that said they would leave the state if Stacey Abrams is elected in Georgia. And it's, just like, it's
Marjorie
like
Taylor Greene and her, like, what was that? The stupid ass national divorce shit. I mean, I saw someone speculate, I have no way to validate this or not, is like, why would Ron DeSantis do this other than getting narco money?
Oh, there's that too.
There's always that link. Dear listener, it's up to you to investigate that. I have no idea. It's just like once again, we talked about this in our Cuba episode where we had like these very loose policies on Cuban quote unquote refugees coming in through Florida. And we've seen recently that like, I mean, and this not to bring it back home, but like the entire state of Michigan and even the entire state of Florida are like ICE enforcement zones now where they could just bust in a door without a warrant if they want to. And to like reopen that cycle of victims of communism blah 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 escaping for Colombia in again an election, a peaceful process, as opposed to the scary revolutionaries in Cuba, right? It doesn't make sense other than to drum up that constituency of the American right.
No one talks about the victims of liberalism in Argentina, though.
No, they don't actually, and that's the thing. Pinochet was the first neoliberal, if we're really looking at this. And also, like again, like this is what I was trying to remember. Is like just last year we had that round of people escaping from Haiti after their leader was assassinated, and I don't think he was an ostensible leftist in any capacity. I don't think he identified as such at all. And these are people escaping repression and seeking freedom in the United States, and we don't take them in. Like, what is this?
Yeah, well, and I mean, and also you have, I mean, Haiti is just another thing too. I mean, just like the amount of natural disasters there, right?
Right.
But God forbid you'd flee from a climate disaster too, like just cloud chasing the American dream.
We laugh, but like I'm pretty certain there's going to be some 17-year-old Republican congressman who says that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like
they're going to lower the age requirement just to let like a even worse Madison Cawthorn in.
Well, they got rid of him.
God, We didn't even get around to
No,
him.
we never
Fuck.
got to him. Oh my
This is
god.
this is why I need to just record more often because I keep missing shit like this, and then my brain's a mess.
Did you ever have the misfortune of seeing the video?
It's not that there was a video; there were many videos,
Oh, I did see
and
one.
I didn't
It was
see
just
one.
like someone just like posted it. Like I mean, Twitter is a wondrous website.
It's
Um,
amazing. It's the
it's
most free fun you can have.
he just commented on it. I was like, wow, like between Cawthorn and Anthony Weiner, I've now seen like the full nude body of a congressman. Like I've seen every angle at this point. Like
This is the transparency in government we don't talk about. We don't talk about it, folks.
no,
Oh
we don't.
God. I didn't watch the videos. I only heard multiple podcasts react to it. And on the Trillbillies, it was funny because they talked about multiple videos, and Aaron, one of the hosts, was just like, "Wait, there was more than one video? What the fuck?"
Yeah.
Oh
Man, just
gosh.
happy Pride Month.
Oh fuck. Yeah, this is why you should record more often. I hear it now, folks. But it kind of goes to show that like even with our out of touch government, the youngest guy they get is basically coked up and partying the entire night.
And I thought he wasn't going to the cocaine orgies.
And then we see a video of him at the cocaine orgies. What does that tell you?
Yeah. It's so weird. Like, I mean, that's the kind of thing that's like so frustrating with a lot of the younger politicians. It's like, I guess, like, I don't know if it's just to get ahead or whatever, but like, I mean, I was never gonna be a Madison Cawthorn fan, just nature of his politics, obviously, but like, it's like he's, this seemingly repressed gay guy, straight out of like the 1980s. You have Pete Buttigieg, who, I mean, is an openly gay guy, but has like these political views of someone who's like twice his age.
Pete Buttigieg, Pete's whole affect too is so funny. Like he's the only repressed straight man we've ever seen. Like I don't know how to describe his affect other than that, but like the Republican Party has a deep tradition, just like Southern decadent motherfuckers. Like Madison Cawthorn's the youngest of it. Lindsey Graham is like the archetype. Honorable mention is Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana.
Oh my god!
Where's that clip you sent me? Where's that clip you sent me? Hang on.
Oh, is it the one about
They're two
using
woke
like
folks.
coke to like run around instead of gas?
Yeah. You called Senator Sanders everything but an ignorant slut. Dear fucking God.
Oh my god.
Okay, I don't know. We walked in trying to find an answer to this, and I guess the only answer we really have is just finding a way to laugh in the tough times, I guess. Of course, do something more. That's like whatever that is. I'm still trying to find that. But you got to find a way to laugh in these dark moments, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, it's they say comedy is the best cure, and it may not be a cure, but it's at least a good sedative.
It is a soothing balm for the burns I experience. Oh gosh. Well, we talked about much more about some pretty bad shit. Do you want to cap this off with a rare reading series?
A rare reading series.
Yes. I shared this with you, I want to say a few days ago. A tab. There we go. So this piece came out of Real Clear Politics.
Oh fuck.
Commentary by Bill Scher. I don't know who the fuck that is. But I'm just gonna read the title and then you can see where this is going.
Yeah, I know.
Kristen Sinema should be the face of the Democrats in 2022.
I think
So
my exact response to this was imagine writing this and not immediately going to a suicide help hotline.
oh my fucking god, I just
Where was the best? I think it's scroll down. I think it's like yeah, second paragraph.
okay. Second paragraph. Okay, so here,
Yeah. So
um,
let's see.
instead of
So
okay,
yeah, so he's talking about how Biden sort of studies that we have 48 out of 50 senators that vote for me 95% of the time. So, and I quote, instead of lumping the two senators together, Manchin and Sinema, as party outliers gumming up the works, Biden should be celebrating Sinema for being a Democrat who gets things done. She was the lead negotiator, along with Republican Senator Rob Portman, for one of the biggest legislative accomplishments of the Biden presidency, the 1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, which is like
God, fuck.
what, a fifth of the promised size. Um, got things done there. Sinema was also the catalyst for the gun safety deal nearing fruition. I believe all this does
Nearing fruition.
Yes, I think it passed the procedural vote
Okay.
today, to be fair. But I think isn't it only like raising the age to like 21? Not that that's
Yeah,
like that's like bad, but it's I think it has like some weird like school security stuff, like one door nonsense probably in there too. Police, patrolling the schools for, so they can, eat popcorn while kids get slaughtered. Maybe that was a little too edgy for the show. I don't know.
No, you're fine because like honestly, like I said this earlier, and I think we should get into. There's so many details that are lost when you don't do regular coverage. Fuck me.
Yeah,
But
we missed that too. Like, oh my god.
well, I did. I mean, we addressed it a little bit earlier, but I mean, like just to really get at what grinds my fucking gears. Is the police, effectively you know their chance to prove themselves after playing the victim for being called out on like their authoritarian ass practices lately, right? um did nothing to help these kids being massacred inside this school. And I don't know if anyone heard this recently. I need to find an article to cite this, but did you hear that at the time the cops were telling people, "Oh, we can't get in because we need a key."
Yeah.
And it turns out the doors were open the entire time and they could have gone in to help at any point.
Mm-hmm.
It's this kind of stuff that I don't know. It pushes people into down the road to crazy. You know what I mean? Especially
Yeah.
when you consider that like the feds had some kind of advanced knowledge of this thing going on. They had been watching the shooter for a minute, had every point to jump in and didn't. It's the kind of stuff that just not to get too conspiratorial, but it's like, what's the point of this massive security state if it can't even protect kids in their schools? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Oh my god. So continuing with our article, she sought out Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and took his advice to connect with Republicans John Cornyn of Texas and Tom Tillis of North Carolina. She brought along the Democrats' leading gun control advocate, Connecticut's Chris Murphy. God. Together, the bipartisan quartet, who wrote this? My God. Found common ground on gun safety legislation when many thought common ground was non-existent. Assuming their initial framework will soon become legislation signed into law by the president, Sinema arguably deserves more credit than anyone for giving Biden and the rest of the Democratic Party a record of accomplishment to run on for the midterm election. Why dwell on how Manchin tanked Build Back Better when you can tout how Sinema broke through Washington's stubborn gridlock? My God.
Well, it's kind of wild too, because you'd think like the way this is written, you'd think this would be the exact kind of guy who would like tout the fact that like, well, actually, Congress does do things, because it does. usually nothing exciting or groundbreaking. But it does do things. I mean, it passes laws, but here it's like he's treating it like she's uniquely capable of breaking gridlock, but hasn't done it for I mean, the infrastructure deal is good but insufficient. But yeah, I don't know. This is I couldn't believe when I read that headline. Just, I mean, this is the take machine, right? This is. It sounds real clear though. Real clear politics isn't usually this bad.
This is commentary, but it's like I don't know if commentary passes the same editorial standards, but
Yeah.
I mean, my God, like someone like looked at this and was like, "Yep, print it. We're good. We're good. We're ready."
I think this was definitely like this will get clicks, and I'm sure it has.
I mean, that's the new strategy now, isn't it?
Probably got like
just write the
10
worst thing ever.
It probably got like 10 just from us. Looking at it, and, it's.
But it makes me wonder, like, for who is the current strategy working for? Because I've been going in relentlessly at this point that like this is working for no one, this is working for no one, and then you read this and you just wonder like who the fuck believes this?
Yeah. And like I get like to be fair, I don't necessarily know how effective as a strategy going at cinema and Mansion is electorally. I don't know if that's a good enough excuse, but celebrating it seems, especially like following that, just makes it seem incredibly disingenuous, right? I mean, it's obviously it didn't cost them the election, but like then that was the same kind of stuff that you get with like when Biden appoints and chooses Kamala Harris as his running mate after she called him a racist piece of shit on live television, basically.
Right.
It's just like that kind of like level of like or everything that the Republicans said about Trump in 2016 and backpedaled. I mean, like that's the exact kind of stuff that gets people like to dismiss politics, is like just like it's nothing's real. So I don't know. This is
I think that may be the reality of it. Like I keep trying to come to this potential prescription or answer, but I think it may be time to accept at some level that like I think we need to soberly analyze just what the conditions look like at the moment, just where we are. And I think just maybe sit with the reality of like this is we're basically a captive audience at this point watching this political spectacle. We have very little input into the Democratic Party, which is the vehicle for anything progressive under this system, and it's lately been incapable of delivering on those things. And we're seeing a right that is ratcheting up the tension. And I mean, I don't know if you saw any of the stuff coming out of Texas, but they're basically legislating their way into seceding at this point, according to some way, analysts, right?
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of like take smithing and prescriptions and new weird ideologies coming around. You see these patriotic socialists and post leftists to top it off. Like it's enough to drive you crazy. And I think it is time to maybe just sit and observe, not in like a reductive capacity or not in like a way that absolves you of responsibility, but maybe just look at like are we missing the forest for the trees? Are we subject to some kind of biases that are preventing us from looking at certain things? Are we are we blinded by things like reverence for institutions, like adhering to certain paths or believing that certain things have inherent priorities over the others? Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But I'm definitely at that stage where it's like I don't know what I can do other than bear witness and be honest about what I'm seeing, and then act from that place, as opposed to feeling like I need to do something but not knowing what that is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the puzzle that we're all navigating and whatnot. And I think that, it's, enjoy the, whatever reprieve we have until, November, to just sit and observe, and, try to figure out, make heads or tails of this. I mean, it seems like I think a lot of people are lost and just kind of looking for a cause to, sort of get behind.
Yeah, it's it is not an easy thing to figure out for anyone, so I sympathize in that respect.
Yeah.
But what you can always do is leave the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast. I'm not fucking doing it. I'm not fucking doing it.
Donate to our Patreon.
Donate to our Patreon that I'm never starting. God. Join our Discord that's still half built.
Hey, it's something.
It's something. I think that about sums up everything I had. Do you have any other closing thoughts you want to share, or?
Yeah, I think that kind of summed it up too. I mean, just once again another current events thing that a whole lot current,
A whole lot of
lot of
current,
venting,
a lot of venting, a lot of Adi's classic alphabet stew that goes nowhere. It's what you come here for.
yeah.
If you want to listen to a better show, Josh is a co-host of a great show called MonsterPop. Do you want to tell the audience about it?
Yeah, so MonsterPop podcast. I do this with a couple buddies that are down in the Dallas, Texas area. It is a pro wrestling podcast. We release a show every week. I think this week will be our 21st episode. Though we have a couple specials, so like it's probably like 25 or something. But yeah, it's been fun. We've been doing it since I want to say like February of this year. We have some, I think, decent content. The past few episodes, I have recited a rap. If that excites you or interests you in any way, I encourage you to check it out. Yeah.
It honestly is a great show because like I've learned a lot about the wrestling world just from listening in, and I don't really engage some of it, but
Mhm.
Podcasts are about vibes above all else. And if you can communicate things through osmosis and good vibes, that is the makings of a good show.
No, I'm glad to hear it.
So yeah, again, like if you're big into wrestling, especially, I recommend checking out MonsterPop. And if you just want to support Josh a little more, support the show.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
But yes, this was another episode of Greenhouse Gaslighting. Stay tuned for whatever we're cooking up in the future. I got all the links to our social media in the description below. Till then, peace out.